incomparable. And here.
Yeah, great, great life. And we really, I mean, let's be, when we heard he died, Carl was visiting our house, and we fell into each other's arms and bawled.
We had a little cry.
Yeah.
And, but it's been the joy of our life, and will continue to be.
Yeah, the memory of all that. And the great lessons. I mean, the lessons they're going to, do. We talked about the Bradlee Club, but there's also the Bradlee Journalism School, which goes on and on and on.
Also,
which,
in this town, too. He cut a swath like nobody ever has.
Yeah.
And it's remarkable what he's left to all of us. And that doesn't go away.
I didn't have the pleasure to know Ben personally, but it's so obvious that his courage, his fearlessness, his verve, his gumption, all of those things are so embedded in the culture of the Post. And what better future could you hope for than to have the DNA of Ben Bradlee embedded in your institution?
When I was in government, and probably in the 60s or 70s, a tree fell down in our backyard in Bethesda. And the next thing I know, Ben Bradlee showed up with a chainsaw and started working on the tree. It was a Sunday, as I recall, and it was the kind of person he was. He was a real force.
Ben was failing, and so I wasn't sure what I'd encounter. I went to see him with my wife, and amazingly, miraculously, Ben, he greet Ben as I always did, and going, how you doing? And spoke to him in French, which he always loved. Salut, mon vieux. And Ben responded in French. He had, in that last encounter, the spark that he had in every meeting I ever had with him.
He was, we thought, the reflection of our best, as a great editor. And editors are essential, because they point the direction that you want to go in, and it is their integrity and their sense of decency and their relentless pursuit of the story that's special. And Ben had all of that, plus such charisma and charm, and every man wanted to be him and every woman loved him.
He had this kind of infectious enthusiasm for the people who were doing the journalism for him. And as somebody wrote today, he was a general who stood behind his troops.
About 3 months ago, I took him to lunch with some young reporters, and just two young reporters he'd never met before, and he was as exuberant as he's ever been, and they were telling him stories about the scandal in the city around the mayor, and he was as feisty about that as if he were running the newsroom. So that's one of my last moments with him.
He made me proud of my city. Every scoop, every difference between the New York Times and the Washington Post was a hometown pride for me.
Well, personally, my favorite memory of Ben Bradlee is when I ended up working on the weekend that I got married and on my honeymoon on the story about the Jason Blair fabrication over at the New York Times. And Ben went on the radio and said, I bet that marriage isn't going to last very long. Well, my new wife wasn't that thrilled, and he sent her a charming letter of apology, and of course we laughed about it for years.
Well, you couldn't beat Ben in a contest of piss and vinegar, because nobody had more piss and vinegar than Ben. And I remember one time, maybe 12, 13 years ago, Ben was doing an online chat with readers, and I was following along in real time, and I was noticing that everybody was being real deferential to him, which surprised me because nobody's ever real deferential to me. And so I decided that I would intrude on this chat. I would ask a question of my own, and I did it under my own name. And I said, by the way, Ben, remind us who Deep Throat was, as though at 80 he might have slipped and given away this big secret. And I expected that he wouldn't answer it, but he did, and he made it the final question that he answered. And he said, as for you, Weingarten, get a life. We'll tell you who Deep Throat is when we want you to know. And meantime, get some exercise and keep off the sauce. And that's how he said goodbye to me in that chat.
We were in the cafeteria, and I think we were in line, actually. And one of the Post employees came up to him. It was not someone who worked in the newsroom. And he was so excited to see Ben, and he said, "Hello, Mr. Bradlee," and he shook his hand. And Ben was incredibly warm and shook his hand, and he said, "Hi, pal." And the man walked away, and Ben turned to me, and he said, "Now you know, Graham would know his name. Don knows everybody's name. I don't. But I always call them Pal or Ace." And then he said, "I don't think they mind, do you?" And I went, "No, Ben, I don't think they mind."